I'm Susan from Sunrise Quilt Studio, and today's video I will be showing you 3 more blocks in the Broken Star quilt. Now the first one is an album variation block, and the center of this block has a large square, and I'm doing a square in a square design and quilting that in. The ruler I'm using is Handy Quilter's mini scalloped ruler, and that's just a nice size. It fits my hand well, and I like it for doing short segments of straight line quilting. And the thread that I'm using is, once again, it is FAD. That is the variegated thread by Signature, and it's 100% cotton. And in the bobbin I have a teal color thread. Now the center is done, and then I'm going to go to those star points. And what I'm doing is, in them is, I'm going to do a 1/4 inch outline around the stars, and I'm doing 2 lines of quilting. They're each a 1/4 inch apart. So I'm using my ruler and also using the width of the hopping foot as a guide so that I can get an accurate 1/4 inch quilting line there. And then I'll just stitch in the ditch to get to the next star point. And I am in stitch regulated mode. You can see that, I'm sure. And I always use stitch regulated mode when I'm using rulers. It just helps me be more accurate and not worrying about accidentally hitting the ruler, and I don't have to adjust the speed on the motor as much. I can just set it on stitch regulated mode and let it go and just take my time and get the quilting done. Now I am going fairly slow on this, even though everything is set in stitch regulated mode, and you can see here I just quilted over that thread, that tail that I had hanging out, so I'm trimming that off. But the stitch regulated mode lets me take my time. I could slow down, I can be very accurate, and just enjoy the quilting process. And when I was quilting for customers, I was always trying to get things done in the most time efficient manner that I could. But now that I'm just doing quilting for myself, I'm enjoying it a lot more. I'm just taking my time, and I'm not as pressured. I think that's the main thing. I'm not pressured to get these quilts done on a time frame. Even though this quilt, I did impose a time frame for myself because I did want to get this quilt done in time for my daughter's move. It's not the same as when you're trying to get a quilt done in time for a customer, because if I hadn't gotten it done in time, you know, what's my daughter going to do? I mean, she's not going to say, well, I'm going to find another quilter. She doesn't care. And so I'm just basically enjoying quilting again. So we're almost done with these star points. Now you could see a little bit how how the different colors in this thread show up on solid fabrics. You couldn't see them in the center of this block with all the prints in there, all the colors in that print, but you can see it really well in these solid color fabrics. And when we get to the black background, you'll see that even more. And it's a really pretty colored thread. It's got all different colors in it, and it's real pretty. Okay, now I'm going to do that triangle in the back of in the background here, and so I'm stitching in the ditch to get to my starting point. And this is a little petal with 2 half leaves on it, so it's an easy design to do. And then I'll just do a continuous curve in the squares, and then I will stitch in the ditch to get to the next point. And in this one, it doesn't matter if you stitch in the ditch around the star points, if you do it on the outside of the block, just whichever way you want to do it to get to your next point. And you can see in some of these background pieces where I have drawn in chalk, and that is to give me a couple of ideas of what the quilting would look like with different designs in it. You can see that in that right lower square I have a continuous curve, but I also have a flower inside that continuous curve. I decided not to use the flower, I just did the continuous curve, and in that little square that I'm quilting right now I had a star drawn in there, and I chose not to do the star either. So even though I have all these designs drawn out ahead of time on the plastic overlay, when I get to quilting it and the quilt is on the machine, it just looks different once I have it on the machine, and sometimes I just need to draw it out with chalk to see what the design is going to look like. So now the chalk's all brushed off, and you can see how that block turned out. Now the next block is the ribbon stars block. Now I lost a lot of the footage of the quilting of this block, and I'm just going to show you what I have available here. Now this block, for the stars, I just did a continuous curve around all the points, and this block was one that I had a little difficulty piecing, and it didn't turn out exactly square, and there's a little bit of fullness in the center. So I have to do a lot of manipulating with my hands and my fingers to get the quilting done on this. You can see I'm doing that here. And there are a lot of seams that come together at a single point in this block too. So there has to be a lot of manipulating. The hopping foot would get stuck in some of those sections, and I'd have to do some manipulating to get that all to come out well. Now in the ribbon sections of that block, I just quilted a little ribbon in there and did that all the way around that block. And that is about all the footage I have there. Now here's the Missouri star block, and for the center of this block I'm doing a petal design that starts in the center and moves out, and all those little petals come to the center. And just doing this one by eye, but I'm using the piecing lines, the seam lines, and just eyeballing the center of the edges of the block, or of the piece, that square, as my guidelines for quilting that design, and it turned out pretty well balanced. I was pretty happy with that. And you could see in this yellow that that variegated thread does show up pretty well. Now the next section I'm going to quilt will be the larger orange triangles, and I just need to secure my threads here and get started. Most of my blocks I do start from the center and work my way out, and that just helps me kind of keep things running smoothly. Now I'm just doing a 1/4 inch outline for this triangle, and just using the ruler as a guide to get from one piece to the next and to keep those quilting lines straight. And I'm just quilting in the ditch here to get from one triangle to the next, and once again I am stuck over that intersection where there's a bunch of seams coming together. So I just carefully walk that hopping foot. I have my fingers right around the edge of that hopping foot, which is not a good idea. But I have been quilting for 18 years and I have not run over my finger yet, thankfully, but I don't recommend doing that. I don't suggest anyone doing what I had just shown you there. That's one of those cases of do as I say, not as I do. But it is a safety issue. That wasn't a safe way to do that, but you caught me there. That's what I did. So don't do that, because if you do run over your finger, you're going to wind up needing a tetanus shot and probably be on antibiotics and not be able to quilt for a while, and it just will not be fun. So don't do that. Okay, for the star points, I'm doing a continuous curve, and I'm treating those star points as one piece instead of the two pieces that make up each of those star points. So then we're going to get to the background, and I'm going to stitch in the ditch to get to my starting point. And once again, using my little ruler. And for this one, I'm going to do some straight line quilting. Now, for a lot of the quilts that are put together, or the blocks that are put together similarly with squares in the corners and the triangles there on the edges, a lot of them I quilted the same, or I used a variation of a design. This piece here has 3 lines of quilting. Some of them I just did 2, and in these corner squares this is going to be quilted the same way that I did several of the other blocks, with the double outline quilting that overlaps in the opposite corners, and that'll be a little bit obvious here in just a minute. But I like to keep a little bit of consistency in the quilting, even though it's a sampler, and it would be perfectly fine to do something different in every single block. I find if I have a little bit of consistency, the quilting goes a little bit faster, and it just helps me out. I don't know that it looks any better. It's just a little bit of consistency goes a long way with me. So that's just the way I like to do that. Now I'm doing the other corner, and just taking my time again. Now I spoke a little bit about the bobbin thread, and the way I choose the bobbin thread for when I'm using a variegated thread in the needle is I usually will pick a color that is in that variegated thread. Now this one had pinks and blues, yellows, greens, purples. So I could have used any of those colors, and I chose teal, and the backing fabric of this quilt is a blue color, so the teal went real well with it. It blended in real well. It went well with the blue in the top thread, and that's the reason I chose that. Now if you have a variegated thread that is just various shades of the same color, like various shades of green or various shades of blue, various shades of a cream or a brown, I would choose one of those colors as my bobbin thread. I don't use the variegated thread in the bobbin because variegated threads are more expensive, and you're not normally going to see that on the back unless you have a solid backing fabric. So I'll just use a solid color fabric in the background or in the bobbin so that it shows up in the background. And if your tension is good, you're not going to see the pokies, so you're not going to see any variance in the quilting there. And I'm quilting the top of the quilt. I'm not quilting the back of the quilt, so that isn't my main priority. The back of my quilt isn't. Now, you will have some customers that may request that the bobbin thread match the backing fabric, and it may be a really strong contrast against what you're doing on the top of the quilt. So that might be an instance where you need to speak to the piecer and let them know that there may be pokies showing through, and that top thread may show through to the back, and there's not much you can do about that. And just forewarn them that that could happen. They may change their mind. Okay, the quilting is almost done. I just have just another line and a half here to get done, and then I'll show you that completed block. I hope this video gave you a couple of new ideas on what you can try on your quilts, and maybe you learned a few tips on using variegated threads. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.
For more quilting ideas, click on the video links, and to keep up with my newest projects, click on the subscribe button. I hope to see you again soon.